We've been working with Fuji for over a year now. They've been supporting or sponsoring this show, particularly entire last year, almost from the very beginning. But in addition to this, we've used their product at the Academy, and I personally have been using it for a number of years now for myself. In addition to all this, they just released, Gary?
They've got a ton of new stuff, but this one is the Last Samurai gi that I'm looking at fujisports.com. They've also got the brand new gamer gi, a ton of great stuff. Check them out, fujisports.com. Bags, mitts, spats, rash guard, anything you need for your jiu-jitsu journey, you can find it at fujisports.com.
If you're a long-time listener of RŌL Radio, you already know what RŌL TV is. However, if you're a first-time listener, you might actually find this very interesting. RŌL TV, online video online platform that we actually put together, available at RŌLAcademy.tv for all that are interested and want to take their jiu-jitsu to the next level.
Yeah, I definitely love it. From lesson plans, fully customizable. Most, if not all, the seminars we've done here at the Academy are there too, from high class practitioners. So definitely check it out. And there's a little coupon code too.
Oh, absolutely. If you want to get extra 30% off on the memberships, make sure you type in RŌL Radio as the coupon and you get savings.
Who doesn't like saving money?
Welcome to RŌL Radio.
And we're live.
Here we go again. First episode of the new year.
2020.
Whoa. Time warp. No, 2022, I hope. Do you put an extra 1,000 years on us? I know I look old, but holy jeeps. Man.
What a year.
It was a
Mr.
weird
Pond.
one. It was a good one. It was a weird one. I don't know. I thought at the end of it, we'd all be back to normal, but I also thought in 2020, we'd be back to normal in April. It's like this whole thing is going to take 2 weeks and then we'll be back to normal. But no, it didn't go back to normal. But we're close. And I think that, we had, so what? 2020, we did 6 months worth of episodes. 2021, we did the whole year, almost twice as many. And then we added the takeaway as well. So we produced a lot of stuff this year.
Yeah. I mean, we really did. We really did, right? So kind of framing in, if you have not listened to the recap of 2020, right? This episode really will focus on kind of recapping things. We're going to.
How aptly titled! Wow,
I know. I am just phenomenal host.
What
mind blowing stuff.
What vacation travel thing is that, Mr. Obvious, Captain Obvious?
But listen, we have some cool stuff planned for you guys for this episode. So one, we're going to play some clips. We're going to play top 3 favorites for Gary, top 3 favorites for me. We'll do some highlights. We'll talk about things that went well, things that didn't go well. We'll make fun of each other. But before we do any of this, I want to give shout outs to one, to all the listeners, because without them, really, we would not be doing any of this. Thanks for supporting us. Thanks for listening to Gary. Okay. Thanks for keeping up with Gary, because I barely can do it. But in all seriousness, Gary, thanks for doing this.
Sure.
Thanks for being here.
It's so disingenuous.
I still remember.
He's just crossing things off his list that he feels he has to say.
Well, listen, politically
got one done.
Politically correct. This is what we do, right? But I still remember the day. Do you remember the day when I came up to you and said, "Listen, what do you think about doing a podcast?" Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. I was sitting in my kitchen, and I was like, "Sure. When do you want to do it?" And you were like, "Let's start in 2 weeks." I said this on the recap last year. Like, you're out of your mind in 2 weeks, but we did. We started in 2 weeks, and we had plenty of adventures with audio that first year. Some this year too, because we got a board and we're doing it trying to be semi-professional. And then we banged out those 6 months of episodes, and then started out this year with some huge names in jiu-jitsu and judo, Olympic athletes, legends, and then like there was
the first 3 episodes of the year were Drysdale, Stevens, and Haueter.
Yeah.
It doesn't get much bigger than that.
No,
this we really pushed that.
And I took 2 of my clips from 2 of the 3 of those. Sorry, Travis. We got, I remember at the end of last year, or the end of 2020, how excited I was for those first few episodes of 2021, and amazing guests right out of the box, man. 3 guys that have been around for forever and have contributed so much, and I was super excited to talk to them.
Yeah, so obviously, all the listeners build the show from a listening perspective, from the receiving perspective, but without our guests, the show would not be what it is. It would be you and I talking, and we can
nobody's going to listen to
nobody's
that.
going to listen to that. We already know that, but the guests are really what makes the show. And so I do want to say thank you to everybody who was on the show up to this point, and I'm looking forward to having many other individuals and personalities from just martial arts perspective on the show, and continue these conversations as time goes on. Hopefully Gary won't quit on me. Hopefully we'll do some amazing things in next year or this year, 2022. Right?
No, 2020, 22.
And I'm looking forward to it, because as all this started a year and a half ago, I think we both had a lot of skepticism around whether we can really pull this off, right?
Yeah, I'm still wondering if we're going to pull it off.
It was a very foreign project, and it started as a project, right? But it kind of evolved into some things we kind of do now.
Yeah, I feel like it's more than a hobby. It's grown into, I think, really, I don't want to sound like I'm any arrogance or anything like that, but I really think we provide our listeners with some deep insight into what jiu-jitsu is all about and what people are all about, and very more importantly, maybe the mindset that you need to have to continue on your jiu-jitsu journey by talking to some, legends and some people that are going to be legends down the road. We've had some very young people on as well. And I think it really does a great service to the JJ community.
Yeah. And we often had this topic of conversation with the guests and between us, like the jiu-jitsu engagement goes way past being on the mat, right? And hearing some of those stories from our listeners, from our guests, stories of struggles, the stories of success, and things that they have done to overcome and to get where they are today. It really, in my personal perspective, it really gives me hope. that we can continue doing this and continue loving this to the point that we do right now, and it will continue in the future. So the plan is, guys, that we'll continue doing this for next year. There's no plan to pause RŌL Radio at this point. We want to continue doing this. Phenomenal job, Gary. Thank you for being here. Thank you for putting up with me. I do want to say that, because that I know
it's a struggle.
I know it sometimes it is a struggle. Sometimes it is a struggle. Thank you for taking over the board.
We'll see how that goes today. We're gonna have sound effects and stuff. Woo.
Gary's venturing into the unknown world of sound effects.
Let me put my binoculars on before we get started.
But you know what makes my day, from the show perspective, is when I have the opportunity to talk to the listeners. Obviously students here, but also people reach out remotely and say, "Hey, listen, you guys are doing a phenomenal job. Thanks for doing this. I would love to be on the show," or, "I think you guys should reach out to this so-and-so." All of this really motivates me to continue doing this. And for the record, this is not so simple. Do you think it's simple, or do you think it was harder than envisioned at the beginning?
I think it was harder in the beginning. And I think over time we have our structure and we know what we're doing, and things fall into place, and we have a routine, right? We have a routine and we have a schedule, and we stick with it. And I think that makes it easier to do, less of a struggle than when we first started. So that aspect of it, I think, has changed a lot for us. And I think we're, obviously listening in here, it's smoother. We understand where we're going with things, more than we used to. And I think that's just from doing it over and over and over again. It just becomes easier.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously this converts into tens of thousands of people at this point,
Downloads are looking good, man.
Downloads are looking good. So, we are proud of it. That's the main thing, right? But we would not be able to have done any of this without our partners at Fuji. And I think I really want to take a moment here to thank Carrie at Fuji, Travis Stevens, and the crew behind the scenes over there, who contributed the entire year to obviously being a partner of the show, but two, providing giveaways to our listeners. I mean, what a phenomenal partnership at this point. Fuji will remain this year as a partner of the show, and we have some cool stuff planned for you guys, as all of this is unfolding. But you got to stay tuned. You got to continue listening, right? You got to be here, right?
Yeah, keep listening. I mean, they did do a phenomenal job, and so easy to work with. And check out everything that they do over there at Fuji Sports. Their gear is amazing, and I couldn't be happier that they're going to continue with us. I'm super, super excited about it.
Yeah, I'm stoked. What do you think? What do you think went well? What was your biggest kind of a lesson over time? What surprised you?
What
year?
Surprised me?
Yeah, when it comes to the show.
Some of the guests we've had, so this is pretty free flowing what we're doing right now, and really, I think what surprised me is towards the end of summer into fall, we had this group of legends, this group of coral belts, these guys that I guess would be like the second generation, that now have been on the mat for 30 years apiece and have contributed so much. And getting to talk to them, it was like one after another of, oh my God, I can't believe, that we're talking to these guys. And I wrote down just a few names: Haueter, Kaiki, Marilia Bustamante, Fabio the General, Gordo.
Yeah.
Yep. Helio Seneca, Dragolino. Kid Peligro. I mean, it just, and that's just,
Mario Sperry.
Mario,
Robert Drysdale, obviously. Dean Lister. I mean,
and those, I think, like Dean and Drysdale are the next generation.
Yeah.
Right. And it just continues. And then we talked to Dominica, we talked to Junie, we talked to Brad Mullins, and it just seems like, or Brandon, I'm sorry. And it just seems like we've got a good spectrum, a good, group, young, old, guys that are contributing now, like I said, and people that'll be legends in the future.
Yeah, it is mind blowing in my mind. Like reflecting, I was preparing for this episode yesterday a little bit and kind of reflecting on the list. And even right before we start recording, I was looking at my notes in my notepad and some of the names that we were able to talk to. I mean, it is mind blowing because we often, and again, on the mat for 22 years, I see these guys, but often I haven't had the opportunity to talk to them. And then boom, here it is. They are calling into the show. We're having a really good conversation with them and learning some phenomenal things. I mean, some of the things that Roy Dean or Roy Dean was actually previous year, but again, what a phenomenal personality. Or Horian Gracie talking about his perspective on UFC and how it all started. The Silver Fox. I mean, the one and only. Like these are all pioneers of different generations. Right? We often think about pioneer, somebody who started, but these guys are making changes. They make an impact on what jiu-jitsu is today. And 10, 20 years from now, we will be viewing them, or maybe the guys who come after us, they will be viewing them as part of the pioneer generation to shape jiu-jitsu to what we know at that time. So again, I truly appreciate everybody being on the show, giving us their time, and they are busy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a little easier in 2020 to get people because everything was shut down. They were looking for something to do. And then this year, as the year went on and things started opening up and people started booking seminars, or they were opening their academies again, schedules got tight, and they still made the time to call in and contribute their stories with our listeners. And I can't be more grateful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What do you think didn't go according to plan?
I knew you were going to ask me this, and we talked about mistakes. We still have, sometimes we forget to hit the record button, whether it's in the call.
Not me. The board is out of my hands.
Well, it hasn't happened since the board's come into my hands. I think we were so, in the beginning, we were so very, I don't know what the word is, but man, if somebody called and their quality was terrible, it was like, we got to do this. We got to do it. And I think at this point we'd be like, hey, this isn't going to work. We have expectations now, and this isn't going to work. One of my clips is from Robert Drysdale, and it was his smoke alarm kept going off in the background. He needed to change the batteries. But it's Robert Drysdale, and it's, we were just a few months into this, and it's like, I'll try and fix it after, and I couldn't, and you'll actually hear that later. And then I think my most fun screw up of the year was when we had Gustavo Dantes on, and the keys for the office were locked inside the office.
I forgot about this.
And I couldn't get in, and I was like, just do it without me. You'll be fine. He has his own podcast.
Okay, let's frame this. Let's frame this because I've completely forgot about this. So we are what, about an hour before show at that point?
Yeah, I came in to do something around the academy, and then half an hour before we always get on.
We are getting ready to get on, and Gary tells me the keys to the office are inside.
I didn't know that yet.
Right.
I just couldn't find the keys.
You couldn't find the keys, right? So to framing it in, he's inside the academy, but there's a locked office that he needs to get to. And we learn through a process of troubleshooting, the keys are inside the office that they're locked in, essentially, right? He's outside of the office. And Gary goes, do the show without me. I was like, I'm not doing the show without you.
And I'm like, you've done a bunch of these. Gustavo's a pro. He's got his own podcast, highly successful. Just do it without me. And Ray is on his way in. He's got his own keys, so maybe I can jump in late. And no, you decided. Well, go ahead and tell him what you decided.
I just told him to kick the door in.
Kick the door in,
and,
yes.
One would think that Gary would have a very gentle, forceful kick that would essentially open the door. But
listen, it's been a long time since I've thrown a front kick.
Well, listen, it worked well because the whole frame came off.
Yes.
We had to replace the whole frame. And even to this point, afterwards, actually, Gary volunteered to paint the door.
I still haven't painted the door.
But he hasn't painted the door. So if you come into RŌL Academy right now, the office door has a raw piece of wood that is unpainted. And I think we're going to keep it that way.
I think if I paint it, we'll forget that it ever happened.
I have a feeling we should leave it.
Yeah.
So I know Chewy has a little corner of the mat with his old mats.
Yes.
We're going to keep that as part of the RŌL Radio memorable moment. Gary kicked the door in.
Yep.
I mean,
and we didn't even talk about it on the episode or anything because, again, being so new.
Yeah.
I think now, if that happened now,
you would catch a lot of crap about it.
We would definitely be talking about it. So, and we have it on Ring Video. We've watched it from time to time. It's kind of funny.
Maybe we should post it.
No, we can't. We cannot post it. People don't need to know why, but we cannot post it. It's not postable.
Not postable.
We'll have to pixelate a little something. That's all.
Let's keep it clean.
Post it after we pixelate.
All right. Yeah, I completely forgot about that. That was a good moment. That was a good moment. Yeah.
Did you have anything? Because I got another one that I
go ahead. Go for it.
So I don't want to call anybody out, but when we had Helio Seneca on, he did it on his phone. He called in on his phone, And throughout the whole episode, his phone would slowly start falling down. He probably had it propped up on a cup or something. Who knows? And it would slowly start falling down, and then he'd pick it up. And it would slowly start falling down, and he would pick it up. And I just, during the episode, I was like, upset about it. But then afterwards, I just thought it was so funny. And he's so funny and fun-loving. And it was just, it fits his personality. He's such a great guy. But watch it on YouTube.
Watch it on YouTube, and it's truly hilarious how the phone slides down. And obviously, you can't hear any of this on the on the podcast, but that's where the video comes in. Really, really, really handy.
That was funny.
Really, really handy. Yeah, good stuff. I mean, there were good moments. There were good moments, right?
Good moments of stuff that people didn't know about behind the scenes, and then obviously we're going to get to the stuff that we thought were kind of highlights of this year. So.
Yeah. What was like the best part for you?
I think really just getting to know these people a little bit. I feel like developing the relationship, because it's some people do just call and we never hear from them again, and they did the show and that's it. But then we've also developed some pretty good relationships with some of these people too, and I think that development is really the overall highlight for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. Cool. Yeah, phenomenal stuff. All right, should we get get this going?
Let's get it going. So we're going to count down our 3 favorite clips of the year. Just 3 that we thought maybe they were funny, maybe they were impactful, insightful, whatever.
So what triggered you to pick your 3? What was the common denominators? What were the criteria that you were searching for? Because I personally found it difficult to go through 50-some clips or 50-some episodes to find 3 clips. And this is not, remember guys, this is not favorite episode. This is a favorite clip out of 50-plus episodes. Yeah. So it was hard for me to narrow down. Like I went through, I got, I think, 14, and then I went to 7, and then I hit a hard time, and finally I picked my 3. But,
I started approaching it with what's the most entertaining, what's the funniest, what's like Goran talking about how deep his fist goes in a skull.
That was the
then I was like, no, what kept reoccurring to me as we would talk to people, older episodes always come up when we're in a discussion. So I like the 3 that really kind of hit home for me over the year were the 3 that I picked.
All right. Well, let's go with number 3 for you.
Number 3 for me.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, here we go.
I don't know.
I got these all backwards.
Okay, then fine. You were the man. You were the show. It was right there.
Who's the man? I'm the man. Hold on. Let me get this situated here. You changed things up on me.
It's good. Okay. Well, then,
but here we go. So my number 3 is Mike Bidwell, BJJ After 40. He's got an amazing story, a really great one, and one of the bigger parts that we talked about with him is he spent 13 years as a brown belt. So why don't we listen to Mike talk about that a little bit, and then we'll discuss it after.
If you ask somebody how long it takes to become a black belt, they'll say, 10 to 15 years. Some people say 10 to 13 years. But I was at one belt for 13 years. And so people always ask me, were you training that whole time? Yes, I was training that whole time. Was I training great? Was I keeping my body in the best condition during that time? Was I keeping my mind in the best condition that time? No. And, why was I stuck there? A lot of reasons, some of it was moving and relocating a couple times, and jiu-jitsu, it's tough when you train at one school, then you go somewhere else. It's like dating somebody, you got to date them for a while before you get married, before you're going to get promoted to a belt. So, there was always some of that going on. And then there was a lot of self-sabotage in a lot of ways. And as I look at it back now in hindsight, because I was that guy that would say, people would say, what belt are you? And I'd be like, I'm a brown belt. Or they would meet me and they'd say, oh, you're a brown belt. How long have you been a brown belt? I've been a brown belt for 10 years or 9 years or 8 years or 7 years or 6 years or whatever it was. And I'm like, I'm going to be a brown belt forever. I don't even want a black belt. So I would make a joke about it all the time. Like, I don't give a shit about the belts. Belts don't matter. And I think that can be a sticking point for people. When you decide that you're not about the belts, guess what? You're not about the belts then. But when you're not about the belts, I feel like you're also not about progression too, because the belts in jiu-jitsu actually mean something. To me, they're like, when I look at it now, I was just talking about this with my students. It's like rungs on a ladder. There's 4 rungs, on this ladder, right? So each rung represents a belt. What's the purpose of a ladder? To get you to the next level, right? You don't stay on one rung forever and be like, I'm just a ladder stander, standing person. Like, I just stand on ladders all day, right? That's not the purpose of the ladders, to get you to the top. So I was stuck on that one rung for 13 years though.
But so what was your train of thought in doing this time? You didn't want the black belt, or you just didn't care about it?
I think at some level I would say that I did care. Of course I cared about it, because I would see because at one point I had moved from the East Coast. And so I had some old students that were back on the East Coast still. And I was out on the West Coast, and some of those guys, I had guys that had started jiu-jitsu with me back in 2001 who went on to get their black belt, or when I started, and went on to get their black belts long before me. Like students that started as white belts when I was a brown belt and went on to get their black belts. So I would see stuff like that, like on the internet or on Facebook, or somebody would message me and say, oh, I got my black belt. And I'd be like, oh, that's so cool. I'm so happy for you. But secretly inside, I was super bummed. I was like, God, I'm never going to get my black belt. And some of it was like, like I said, I had moved and relocated and stuff like that. And, it's just kind of like, I just wasn't progressing forward, How much,
if you had to identify a percentage, how much the relocation had to do with it, or how much your mental state had to do with it?
I think more my mental state than anything, truly. Like, I think if I'd really buckled down, and focused, I probably could have gotten my black belt. But in hindsight now, I'm kind of happy I didn't. You know what I mean? Like, I'm happy I got my black belt when I did, because it all worked out perfect. I don't think I would be the black belt that I am right now. I wouldn't be the person that I am right now, let alone the black belt that I am. So in hindsight, it really served me. Go ahead.
Well, that's what I kind of wanted to talk about, because I think if I'm following your timeline correctly, at that point you were also really overweight. And I think, so I know how that plays into it as well. So can you talk about that mental state a little bit more?
For sure. And a lot of that too, because I wasn't eating healthy, that was a big part of it. Like, my diet sucked. Before I was 40, before I really made this big shift in my life, because it really happened at 42, that when I really made a big shift. But before that, I was eating really crappy, had a terrible diet. So I was the guy, in my 20s, I could eat anything I wanted and I'd always be in good shape. I'd always have abs and all that crap, but I was always in good shape. I ate crappy food though. I'd eat McDonald's. I eat everything bad all the time. Then when I hit my 30s, if you carry that diet over into your 30s now, right, your metabolism shifts. I started getting out of shape, and then I started getting heavy, and I got up over 200 pounds, which for me, a guy that was always 155, 6'1", I was always pretty thin and tall. That was really out of shape for me. My blood pressure was really high. I was having a lot of gastrointestinal and stomach problems. I was getting sick all the time. So, and then of course, my jiu-jitsu sucked. When your diet sucks and your food sucks and the way that you live sucks, your jiu-jitsu is not going to be great. I tell my students this all the time, all of these factors matter, right? You can come to jiu-jitsu and train as hard as you want, but if you go home and you're sabotaging everything that you're doing on the mats, that cycle is not going to help you, right? It's not going to serve you. You're really working against yourself. So, but I know that from experience, because I was totally working against myself. I wasn't eating good. I wasn't thinking good. I was depressed all the time. I was even suicidal at one point. So everything kind of wasn't going my way. And my jiu-jitsu wasn't either, right?
Did you know at that time that that's the position you were in, meaning that there was signs of depression and difficulties? Did you know that was happening, or was there a list of excuses and it just, my life is hard, this is what I have to do, blah blah blah, and
all of that, right? I was having pity parties. I was just all of that. It was all kind of factoring into everything. And then really a big shift happened when I was 42.
So what happened at 42?
I'll tell you, my daughter came. So my daughter was doing jiu-jitsu and still doing jiu-jitsu. She's 15 now. At the time I think she was 5 or 6 years old. She said, I want to do a jiu-jitsu tournament. And I had told her, when she was little, I said, if you ever want to do a jiu-jitsu tournament, I'll go do the jiu-jitsu tournament with you. I'll compete with you. And then all of a sudden she was doing jiu-jitsu and she wanted to go and do a tournament. I think she was like 6 years old at the time. And so there was a tournament coming up. I was living in upstate New York and training there at the time. And there was a Naga tournament coming up. And she's like, wanted to sign up. And I said, all right, I'll sign up with you. But at the time I was like 200 pounds. So, and I was like, so I signed up to get to compete, I think 175. So like I gave myself like 2 months to lose some weight. So I lost like 25 pounds and I went in and I competed. I was a brown belt still at that point, and I tapped out a couple black belts and I got first, and it was a cool experience. And my daughter got first place. And it really sent me now in this trajectory to like get in shape, because I'd lost 25 pounds. I was like, I'm 175 now. This is kind of cool. So then I really kind of pushed it and got myself down to like 155 and started competing and just really got in really good shape, and like shifted my diet, shifted my thinking, and put myself on a path to get my black belt. That's
beautiful. Is that when you talk about flow you? I've heard you say a couple times.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
That's where the long hair came from. See the long hair? That's where that came from. That's where all this shift of, you know, who I am and who I've become, and, you know, who I continue to become in my life.
Would you say that this was accidental, meaning kind of just cards fell in place, or was this more intentional?
It was definitely, I think it was intentional. I don't believe in accidents. I think there's some intention behind everything. It's interesting because the word intention means, if you look it up, I just looked this up just recently, it means to stretch your purpose. So if your intention is to stretch your purpose, right? I feel like this is my purpose. You know what I mean? My purpose was to, at some point, to give back to jiu-jitsu.
I love that clip, and it's a long one. I think it's the longest one we're going to play today. But I really love Mike's attitude, and you know, if you see Mike, you know who he is. He's 52. He looks like he's 32. He moves like he's 32, and I think it's just because of how much he has changed in the past 10 years and what he's done for himself, his family, and for jiu-jitsu. He talks about giving back at the end there, man, and he really has given back a ton.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and first of all, I choked halfway into the
I wasn't going to bring it up.
I don't know if Gary is gonna clean that up, but if you hear me choking in the background, that's me.
Yeah,
my coffee went. My son would say the coffee went down the wrong pipe. But anyhow, you know, I can really appreciate what Mike is doing, what he has done for himself and for his community, simply because, you know, when I was starting jiu-jitsu, I was in a similar spot. You know, the weight struggle is always there, and sometimes we get casual with our lives, and they go in their very different direction. And that positive change is really, really important, not only for you, but also creates an inspiration moment for your students and for your friends, for the circle that you surround yourself with. So good for you, Mike. I mean, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He's given back so much. His videos are amazing. And I think that clip sums up that whole episode. I think it's inspirational. It talks about giving back. And it's really, really something special.
Yeah, no, again, Mike, thanks for being here. Phenomenal story. Check out Mike. If you don't know who he is, you should know.
Yeah, he's a 52-year-old dude that rolls like I said. I'm even going to go to 22. He's unbelievable. He really is. So are we moving on to your number 3?
Yeah, my number 3.
All right, Sean Williams.
Sean Williams. Let's take a listen.
Oh, right away, huh? We're going to give it. Let's do it.
You mentioned successful academies. What does that mean to you?
That's a great question, Thomas.
What is success?
Yeah, that's a great question. Successful academy, to me, is one that you see people smiling when they leave. You know, that you're changing humans' lives. You hear it all the time. Like, people come into jiu-jitsu, and whatever reason you start, because it's so many different outcomes that you can get. And I always say that I believe that jiu-jitsu is the martial art that, to me, that most sort of symbolizes life. And your life can almost take a proportional, like a linear path to jujitsu, the way you deal with life can be influenced by the way you deal with what goes on the mat. It's almost like can be almost like a scary thing, like how you handle your training scenarios. If you really dive in and look, like you can almost see yourself, your life in that, how you handled that. So to me, success is getting an individual and getting them to get out of whatever it might be that they need to get out of jiu-jitsu. So sometimes it's mental health, sometimes it's physical health, sometimes it's confidence, sometimes it's whatever it might be. I think as humans, we all have these patterns that repeat themselves, and sometimes they're good and sometimes they're not good. And if something is repeating itself, I feel like and it's not what you want, it's not ideal. You need to really be in tune with that and change some things. And I feel like jiu-jitsu really does that. Like you can be doing jiu-jitsu and you have these patterns that come back around and they're not what you want. Well, it's an odd philosophical thing, but I think if you looked at your life, you'd probably find the same. If you're having these issues in jiu-jitsu and you're not solving them, you've got probably something is going on there as well. And when you begin to start to open up and solve things, that I think it opens up as well for your life. And that's a long-winded answer to your question, but that's success. Success is more about the person, the individual getting what they need to get out of it. Because it's so different for everybody.
Well, and I think that's what's difficult from a coaching perspective, from an instructor perspective, that you dealing with, dozens, hundreds, depending on the size of the place where you find yourself in. But you're dealing with all these individuals. They're all different. They think differently. They have different goals. They came from different places.
Yeah.
How in the world do you manage all of this to really be able to cater towards everybody and give them what they want? Because they walk into your academy, they see Juan Sean.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
Yeah,
I mean,
no, it's true.
They see you and they go like, hey, and like, do you ever find yourself like, John? No. Bobby? No. Pete, yes. Hey,
of
Pete,
course.
what's up, man?
Of course. I had a couple of good pre-training things. So number one, I was a bartender before. So which is quote unquote a psychologist, if you will. So I had some pre-training before jiu-jitsu. No, I'm kidding. That was a joke. Yeah, you're right. It's you've got to be, I have some tools to help me remember people's names, but really it's just about being really switched on and engaged when you're meeting them. Or you could go about it like when I first started jiu-jitsu, Henzo called me champ for a little while. Hey, champ, how you doing? And then of course, as you get, then now you're Sean. Yes, but it's so inviting and welcoming that you're just like, I don't, whatever. He just finally called me. He called me his name, and it was a funny time. But I think you're right. You can't, if I would talk to the instructors for a minute, not just your fans and your audience, you can't solve everybody's problems. We're not meant to do that. I'm not equipped to handle those things. What I can do is I can coach, and I can coach jiu-jitsu, and I can coach. I believe that jiu-jitsu has, and MMA as well. I believe they have challenges. We bring on these challenges and these problems, like you had mentioned earlier. Like I think that's why people get addicted to it, because it's a consistent and constant problem solving that we do every single day. I think those things can be. You can open up thought through your teaching, and you can open up different philosophies through your teaching that are pretty open-ended, but might have a real impact in a different way for different individuals. Like, one guy, as I said, might be there for focus. He gets a lot of focus when he's in jiu-jitsu, or one guy might be there. He's getting a lot of confidence out of it. But if you're able to open that door for somebody just through teaching or through coaching, that's my approach. It's not really, you can't deal with everybody and everybody's problems, but you can certainly open the doorway for learning, because there are several different ways to learn, and people learn differently. But you promote those thoughts. And if you can promote and invoke thoughtfulness in people, they start thinking about things and thinking about problem solving, then hopefully it transcends into a bigger picture. And then that's really cool.
Sean.
Yeah,
He's awesome.
He's awesome. I met Sean decades ago, way on the beginning. I think I was a blue belt when I met him first time. And
I met everybody when you were a blue belt.
Well, you know what? I don't think I've ever said this, but way back in the day, I worked for a real estate management company, corporate real estate management, and I think they had 40 offices domestically, and I did travel. Not a lot, but it was enough. It was a week out of the month, I think. I was on the road doing technology for these guys, and it really gave me an opportunity to compete at different places, and visit different academies. Matter of fact, a lot of my corporate travel was actually surrounded by what was happening in the area.
I'd be happy to go there.
I would be happy to go there, but hold on, let me check the tournaments. Let me check if there's an academy over there, And if there wasn't, it was always the drag trip, that one that nobody wanted to
be on.
Right. But anyway, yeah, they gave me the opportunities to meet Sean Williams, and what a great guy. And I feel like he never has a bad day. He's always smiling. There's always good stuff going on and such a positive vibe. So I was really happy to have this conversation with him. And in a very personal way, it was very inspiring to me to listen to his philosophy on jiu-jitsu and on coaching, especially that I do have to say, and I have to apologize to some of my students, because I'm guilty of the, hey, what's up, champ, as well. So, and I want to clear that up right off the bat. It's not because I don't know your name. I'm trying to be cool, okay?
Yeah.
But
Keep trying.
I'm guilty as charged of that.
Oh, what are you gonna do?
Hey, boss. Hey, champ.
Yeah.
It's, I guess something to work towards.
There's always room for improvement, but I think that you do a very good job of trying to at least be personable to everybody who comes through the door. And if you sometimes, like you said, there's only one Sean. Well, there's only one Thomas when they come in. There's only one instructor. They've really only got to learn one name, but you've got to learn, 30 or remember 30. Right. And sometimes that's hard to do, especially.
That's more than 30, but yeah.
Well, you know what I'm saying? I mean, in that class, I'm just talking about that one class, Yeah. And then there's another one after with a bunch of different people. So, now you do a fantastic job. Fantastic.
All right. Well, that was Sean Williams.
He's a great guy. And, he's also very, very funny. That clip, you only hear a little bit of it, but, that's a very funny episode as well. So are we moving on?
Let's move on.
My number 2, brought his name up a bunch of times already, Robert Drysdale. At this point, his book had just come out, and we were lucky right out of the gate of 2021 to have somebody of his caliber on. And he said something that I think is really, really important. So we'll talk about it after, but let's give a listen right now.
There are two great moments in the modern history of martial arts. I'm referring to martial arts not as in the warfare aspect of martial arts. I'm talking about what we refer to martial arts to be a daily practice, right? Mm-hmm. There are two great moments. One is Jigoro Kano's brilliance. Jigoro Kano needs to, we got to give the man credit. Mm-hmm. He convinced the world, ministries of education, Olympics, governments around the world. He convinced them that teaching children how to fight was a great means for educating them. Let that sink in. How do you convince people of that in the 1900s, early 1900s, that teaching children how to fight is a great way to educate? Like, how do you pull that off? Like, that's a difficult argument to sell today after years and years of like marketing being hammered through people's heads, like the martial arts are good for your kids. And this man invents that. It's incredible. It's the biggest revolution in the history of martial arts. He gets the ball rolling. Every martial artist, anyone who's selling martial art, even if you're not judo or jiu-jitsu, you owe some thanks to Jigoro Kano because he created that space.
Absolutely.
The second revolution to me is Hoist Gracie. And like, Bruce Lee, I think Bruce Lee was a good actor, might have been a good fighter. We have no idea because no one's ever seen him fight, but I think he made it popular to a lot of people. But I don't think there's any great revolution in the sense what Hoist did. What Hoist did was he changed the world forever. Like, no one's ever going to look at fighting, the way they used to after Royce Gracie, after the UFC. And you got to give credit not just to Royce. You got to give his older brother credit. Rorion is not the most loved character, but I don't think he got his full credit for his ambition because, man, the guy was sleeping in the back of cars. Like, he's sleeping in garage. Like, this guy was hustling to make like Carlos Gracie, like his uncle. Once again, the ambition. The cornerstone of jiu-jitsu is ambition, and it's not technical. It's not some great technical revolution, or it's just, we're going to make it. We're going to do this. This is going to happen. I don't care. Where we stand in the world, where we are right now, we deserve a higher place. And the opening quote of the book, I chose a passage from King Lear, the bastard speech, right? Mm-hmm. Man is born a bastard, but he's convinced that he's going to change his destiny because I belong in a higher place. I don't care where I was born. And here come these Brazilians from the Amazon, and they invade Hollywood, and they're hustling, and we're going to make it happen. And there could not have been a better vehicle than the UFC. Like, they chose the right vehicle. You're right. A jiu-jitsu tournament wouldn't have made a dent in the martial arts world. They had to pitch karate versus taekwondo versus sumo versus judo versus wrestling. And had they not done that, there's no way any of this would exist. We would all be doing judo now or something else. We're not training at all. And the role of the individual in historiography is often neglected. People look at the grand movements of economics and nationalism. But I think in terms of our martial arts history, I think Rorion is a very, very neglected individual. Like, I don't think he ever got the credit he deserves for his vision and ambition.
Yeah. Yeah. And go ahead.
Beep.
Oh, the beeps.
Beep.
Beep. Yes. What was that? That was so talking about like mistakes earlier and stuff. So that, I think that was his smoke alarm and his microwave going off. I think what he was talking about was more important than anything that was in the background. And,
we do love Robert. And
yes,
first of all, a phenomenal grappler. That's one, accomplished so much on the mat and off the mat, from teaching to competing, or competing to teaching. But also the book is, if you've never read it, or you haven't read his book, I encourage you to do it, right? Whether you love history or not, I think is a fundamental piece of knowledge that everybody should dip into.
Yeah,
right?
For sure. Well, I think it dispels all the folklore and all the misinformation. It gets rid of all that. It cuts to the truth a bit, because of that, I think it helps legitimize something. Well, I mean, it's already legitimate, but it really helps push the real aspects of jiu-jitsu, what really happened, and puts things in perspective. I think that it's going to change a lot of minds, for sure.
Well, it's even if you look at it from a perspective of just events taking place, right? Forget about right or wrong, who sets what, and so on. I think it's entertaining and stimulating to read some of the stories that he talks about in the book from a historical perspective. He touches on things that I personally didn't know, and he talks about individuals, and I think it talks about individuals that are no longer alive. But I think what's important here to highlight is that I could be wrong on this, but I think he said during the recording of the episode, 3 guys that he interviewed already passed on.
That was during the taping of the accompanying film that he's doing with the book. Yeah,
right.
3 of the people he talked to had passed away in that time between the book and the film. And thankfully, he got to them. Otherwise, maybe a lot of that history would have been lost.
And I think that's really important for us to acknowledge.
Yeah.
I remember way back in the day when Helio Gracie was still alive, and we all have expiration date, but it never crossed my mind that I would be in a position where Helio will no longer be around. And I don't know the guy. I've never met the guy, but he's the one that a lot of us look up to as the founding pillar of what we do today, right? He's the pioneer. He's the one who kind of pushed it in the right direction, or in the direction that we know today. And there's many others who have contributed right? But he's kind of the one. And I remember the day when I found out that he passed on. It was like, wow. I mean, that, okay, this just happened. And the reason why I'm saying this, because I was fortunate enough to actually have to purchase his book, instructional book, with his signature. Like, he actually signed it to me, and that's one of the most precious things that I have in my life, amongst a couple other books that I have, and they are signed. But that's really eye opening. I guess what I'm trying to say, we all have expiration date, and if you have a hero or somebody you look up to, jiu-jitsu or non-jiu-jitsu wise, like, I encourage you to really dip into it. Like, make necessary steps to meet them, and make some necessary steps to engage with them, because you might not have the chance,
right?
Yeah, you might not have that chance in the future. You know?
And there was one thing I wanted to mention about that clip too, is he talks about Hoist, but he talks more about Horian, and we were lucky enough to have Horian on as well. And he talks about how he was hustling and sleeping in his car and working, all the jobs and stuff. And he said hustled. The dude hustled. And after we talk to people, we always do a takeaway. And the takeaway from Horian was titled Hustle. Mm-hmm. And it's just, I think it's a neat little connection between one episode to another. And listen to Horian's episode too, because man, that dude did hustle.
Yeah. So I think if we look at this, kind of from a continuity perspective, if you listen to Robert Drysdale, which Robert Drysdale was, do you remember which?
I don't have any of that up. No, I don't remember.
I don't know which episode he was. But if you look at Robert Drysdale, you want to listen to Horian, because he tells his side of the story from similar historical perspective, So it's always interesting to see both of them. And Horian was number 52, while Robert Drysdale is number 30. So listen to Drysdale first, listen to Horian Gracie second. They tell similar stories, how all these things unfolded, just from different perspectives, right? So it's interesting how these conversations unfold, and how we can get kind of a fuller picture, by talking to these guys.
For sure, it rounds everything out for you. Are we moving on?
Yeah, let's move on.
All right, you're number 2.
Oh, Kid Peligro. Kid Peligro.
Don't say it. Don't give away the punchline.
I won't.
Don't say it. All right, we're gonna go for it.
Go for it.
Real funny story. So one time I don't remember if I went to compete in the Worlds or went to one of these 1-month things, and came back, and I was like, man, I was at the academy. I was in Rio. I was just really doing well. I wasn't killing everybody, but I was, feeling really good and doing well. So I came back and I took a class with Hickson, or private, or I was just hanging out with trained. And he finished training. He looks at me and said, Gaddy, went to Brazil and you came back dangerous. All this malice. You were just moving around left and right. You were just like and I'm feeling really good, right? And he goes, you're just like an eagle with no feathers. You're going flop, 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 and you fall. You're not accomplishing anything with all your movement. And I go, oh my gosh. I never forget.
I'm noticing the pattern.
Yeah, animals.
He builds you up, and then he tells you the reality.
Yeah. Here, you feel so good. At that time, I felt so good. You're like an eagle. I said, finally, I get a compliment. I finally, with no feathers, flop, 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 flop. So he always kept me humble. I mean, not that I had any reason not to be, but you're just. But yeah, you come back, and of course, I didn't keep everything a secret. I had people that I cared for and I shared, but it wasn't for just everybody. We just kind of like for very special people, and nowadays, I share everything because it's a different situation.
Well, that was kind of my question now is do you think that some of that fundamental knowledge that Hickson and Haueter and all of these guys, the generation one, if you will, right? If whatever they passed on and whatever they didn't pass on, do you think that's going to get lost at some point? Because I mean, we all have and I don't mean to be negative here, but we all have expiration dates. Like, I mean, it's at some point, if we don't pass this on and the people who we pass it on to continue passing the baton, I mean, do you think that, what are your thoughts on that? Well,
for one thing, like both Hickson and Haueter have online training.
Yeah.
And Haueter has a lot of associations he shows. But Hickson, for instance, he never wanted to teach anybody that he couldn't see the ice. Like he wanted to be breathing the same air. So he has to be in person so that he knows. And then more recently, he realized that he has a gift and a legacy that he needs to share. So he started doing his online classes, and I subscribed to it. I trained with him forever, and I actually a paid subscriber because I just, oh my gosh, I forgot this, and oh my gosh, this detail I forgot. But they did enough instructors and black belts, but nobody is them. So you will lose some, but there is new. Amazing people, there's old amazing people, Hansel, Hoyce. I mean, it's just I don't have as much experience with them, but Haueter and so forth, There's a lot of amazing people. They're furthering their fundamental knowledge forward,
Like eagle.
Like
eagle
an eagle.
with no feathers. I just love how he tells this story. And there were other stories that he told.
There's something about a lion in there. Good stuff. And what a great guy, man.
I think this was, like if I had to pick a full episode, I think that one would really rate on the very top of my list. What a great guy. What a great personality. Phenomenal storyteller. Phenomenal storyteller.
Yeah, for sure.
If you have not listened to Peligro's,
and I got to say something.
Yeah.
Hickson calls him Gary instead of Jerry.
Yeah.
Which is fine. It's Hickson.
Yeah.
And just recently, Braulio Estima was calling me Jerry instead of Gary.
Well, there you go.
Here we go. Everything's tying back in, right? I'm noticing this. And I'm fine I don't care if they get my name wrong as long as they acknowledge that I'm in the conversation.
But we often, look up to individuals like Hickson Gracie. We talked about Helio recently, just moments ago, right? I mean, these are pioneers of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then you listen to the guys who were there with them, like Peligro or Leo Xander is another one, right? He hung out with Hickson Gracie.
Yeah, he was his right-hand man.
Right, he was right his hand, right? So listen to these episodes because these stories are irreplaceable, right? The way how they operated and the inside information, just from operational perspective, the day-to-day, the interactions that these guys had and still have with these pioneers is just mind-blowing in my mind.
Yeah, and I was just talking to a member here, Scott, earlier today about different guests that we've had, and something that we talked about was like, we've talked to all these guys who have been there at the forefront of Gracie Barra, and just how wonderful all these individuals are. And you can see why Gracie Barra is what it is, and why it's grown the way it has, because of the individuals involved. And I think that our guests, 99% of them are really great individuals, and you can see why the sport has been evolving as much as it has been the past 20 years or so.
Yeah, no, phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Should we get to the next one?
Yeah, where am I? Are we down to my number one already? Yeah, we did Mike, right? We did Robert.
Yeah.
Wow, number one.
We're flying through this.
We are. My number one is one of the Dirty Dozen. It's not one of the most colorful things he talked about in his episode, but let's listen to Chris Haueter here talk, and then we will jump in.
In some ways, as much as my well, coaches viewed me as a warrior. I'm much more of a ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. I'm more of a diplomatic kind of guy.
Yeah.
And part of what I loved about but jiu-jitsu is it's diplomacy.
Yeah.
It's non-violent. It's the least violent of the ways in which you can wreck your opponent. Even judo, you are hitting your opponent with the earth, right?
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
And wrestling is explosive and athletic. And because it lacked submission, what you would do is pin your opponent in your high school brawl in the alley and then punch them or grind them down until you could hit them more. But jiu-jitsu really was this magic. It's like, wow, I can put my opponent in a spot, especially a joint lock or even a choke, where I can talk to them and resolve our conflict now through words because I'm controlling my opponent.
Mm-hmm.
I can now say, like years ago, I was a cop, and it's the perfect arrest and control tool because you have them in physical compliance, which then you can rapidly get them into mental compliance. You control the body, then you give them, you let them realize, I'm giving you mercy. I am mounted on you. I have turned you over. I am on your neck. I could kill you, and I am giving you mercy. And that, as a psychological effect, is huge. Now, of course, years later and all that, and in the combat sports, the art of pressure is one of my favorite things because pressure does that before you've even gotten your opponent into a lock or a choke. That feeling of being absolutely controlled.
Powerless.
Yeah, you're powerless. You can't breathe.
Right? Yes. And that is the art of jiu-jitsu. So I often say when I'm asked, and I've been saying this for years, is when they ask me, what is jiu-jitsu? I say, well, let's talk about street, art, and sport first. And then I will talk about that. And then I will say, the art of what jiu-jitsu is the art to control and submit my opponent, utilizing the least amount of athletics and the maximum amount of knowledge, cunningness, and guile. What is the sport, you ask? I knew you would. The sport is, how do I deploy my art within the man-made rules of the game, utilizing all of my art and the maximum amount of my athletics as well. That's the sport. And what is the street, you ask? The elimination of the man-made rules of the game, a fight in spirit to the death, where I will use everything I have in the absence of all rules. And that's where I split them apart.
Can you tell he's passionate about jiu-jitsu?
I think he's passionate about everything. What a guy, man. I had heard of him. I knew what he had accomplished, but I didn't know his personality until we talked to him. And afterwards, I've said oftentimes, even though Chris has only got about 6 or 7 years on me, I want to be Chris Haueter when I grow up. I think he is like the coolest guy. He's an artist. He is a philosopher. He has lived an incredible life, and just one of the coolest guys. And I won't say who, but he also trolls people. He is not what you would think when you judge a book by the cover, if you look at him and you judge him by the cover, he is not who you think he is. I think he's a really deep person. I think he has viewpoints that are on the opposite end of the spectrum in the jiu-jitsu world, in the combat sports world. And he is very free to share them with you. I don't think he gives a shit anymore. He probably never did. Maybe having Hickson throw you in, or I'm sorry, the Machado brothers throw you into garage challenge matches. You probably don't care about too much after that, as when it comes to what people think of you. So really a great guy. And I really love how he describes jiu-jitsu and that triangle that he talks about often.
Yeah. Chris is very raw, and but also creates, he's very passionate about jiu-jitsu, very passionate about what he does, how he speaks about it. Often individuals who go to his seminars, he described this as a one in a lifetime experience.
Yeah.
He's very animated, very outspoken. He's not afraid to say what he thinks, but he's
respectful about it all. And
right,
touching on what you just said, he will say something at the beginning of a seminar, see the reaction, and then be like, "Okay, I know where my audience is today, and I know what I can do and what I can't." And he's respectful of that audience, and I think that's really important now.
Yeah, so I encourage you to listen to the whole episode. This is another good one. Pioneer, right? Dirty Dozen. Like, it doesn't get closer to the source than this. This guy's been doing jiu-jitsu way before jiu-jitsu was jiu-jitsu, in this country at least.
Yeah.
So, and he does talk about things like how come he doesn't have an academy. Yeah, sponge that for a second. The guy who's been on the mat for decades, he doesn't have an academy, doesn't even remotely thinks about opening one, and there's a reasons behind it. His wife is a black belt as well.
Melissa, she's amazing.
Absolutely. We've talked to her as well. Check that out. They train in their own garage.
Combat base.
But anyway, all this, again, creates a historical points and really points of engagement where we can really think about, Gary.
I got my combat base shirt on today. I just realized
Look at that.
Channeling Chris.
Oh, boy. Be like Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should all be a little more like Chris. Yeah. Absolutely.
Check it out. Chris, again, unique individual. If you've never met and never heard of him, you should.
Yeah,
you
for sure.
Most definitely.
We always say we want to have you back on, right? And we mean it. But I think with Chris, it's somebody that we should really shoot to have back on. He's got a lot more to share with us.
Mm-hmm.
So are we moving on to your number one, sir?
Yeah, I'll tell you. This one was a surprise, and I'm not going to talk about it until afterwards, but this was a surprise for me. One of the main reasons why it made it to my number one clip. Dedeco surprised me to the point who he is and how he carries himself, how much passion he has for jiu-jitsu. So let's take a listen.
Do you think that because we have this access to the constant technology today, do you think that makes it easier or more difficult for students?
I think it's going two ways. I would say that makes way easier to learn, to search. It's a great tool. But I think the only thing that it makes harder, because when they see the technique, they don't understand that it took that guy years to get there.
Yeah.
To apply that technique. You see these guys doing a berimbolo, a new knee bar, whatever. They didn't start doing that move overnight. They build a very strong foundation and game to be able to do that technique. That's the only my concern. People ask me all the time, because Dedeco, are you against? I say, no, it's an awesome tool. But make sure when you search things that are in your level. That's what I try to tell them. And not only that, the most important is when you see, it's way more involved than you can understand. So just ask your teacher. Come to I don't believe. I don't feel offended when a student mine comes in and say, "Hey, Dedeco, I saw this person doing this technique. What do you think?" Can you help me? I don't mind at all. And I help them usually because sometimes they don't understand. That to get to that position, it's 100 steps before that to getting there. And sometimes the video doesn't explain that because the person that's teaching or doing, he just does automatically that he doesn't have to pay attention to those small details. And I tell, when I teach my classes, I like to mention that. I say, listen, the secret of this martial art, it's not in the big movements. It's on the small movements, the very small movements. That's what I believe the secret is, what makes the difference.
Yeah, it's that hidden stuff, the hidden jiu-jitsu.
The hidden
right?
stuff,
Absolutely.
what Rickson talks about, the invisible jiu-jitsu, right? What you don't see. You see the big picture, but you don't see the really small tweaks here and there, little details just on the hand position. Instead of here, it's here. Those little things.
And there's another aspect of this whole I saw video on YouTube or Instagram, and I want to learn this is I think a lot of students today, they ignore the fact that whoever is recording that video, they've done that move probably hundred, if not thousands of times with the purpose
100%.
of being smooth for that video.
100%.
Honestly, it doesn't always necessarily mean that they know how to teach the technique or they understand mechanics behind. They just flow, but it is very visually stimulating. It does happen, in my academy when students come to me and say, well, here's a blue belt and he can do blah, 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 and, always it pops in my mind. Well, do they even know how to escape the top control?
100%.
Do they even know how to do simple arm lock from a guard, or do they know how to protect themselves if somebody's coming from a front approach? Distance control, these very, very simple principles of jiu-jitsu, they are not visible in that 30-second clip that you're watching.
Right. And how about that? If you're saying that a blue belt is doing this on this video, how often does that blue belt train? Is he there twice a day, 5 days a week? Or is he the blue belt who's asking you, how come I can't do this? Or you're not teaching me this? Is he somebody that's there 3 times a week?
100%. Yeah, that's true. And also the guy that's doing the technique too, sometimes that is his move. That's the only thing he does. The only move he had. I usually call those guys, they are the fish. Once you take them out of the water, they have no idea what to do. So they only have that movement. If you block that movement, they don't have an answer for.
Yeah. I mean, that is...
And what you just said, right? They don't know how to escape from side control. They don't know how to approach a front position. What you just said. And I think it's 1,000 of people like that now. Like they only know one way. Like when I learned jiu-jitsu, De La Riva was huge about something. And I thank him so much because of that. De La Riva used to make us, like if we're going to drill something, he used to make us drill 5 times in our good side and 5 times 5. So 25 on our not so good side.
Oh, wow. I like that concept.
Okay.
Yeah. He never said bad side. It's not so good.
Yeah, not so good. I always say,
guess what we do in class today?
I always say
this just got implemented.
Yeah, I always say it's the weaker side. I don't say bad side. It's
it's just the side that you're not using
strength, right?
Yeah, I have one of my students actually. You know how he calls? He say, Dedeco, they're going to work on their good side, and they also going to work in the other good side, right? So he say it's pretty cool how he says.
I like it.
But De La Riva used to be huge about that, like forcing us to go both sides. And one day I asked him, I say, Della, why do you make us drill both sides? And then he said, do you know what side he's going to pass? Right. I'm like, absolutely. No. He's like, so you got to be prepared for both.
I do wonder if Dedeco ever has a bad day. He's another guy who smiles all the time. If you follow him on social media, I mean, such a passionate guy. Oh, yeah. Lord. What a great conversation with him. And he's funny too.
He's funny. He's personable. He's another one of those guys that I think is a real credit to what they do and the community that we have. And how he presents himself and his academies and what he's doing out there on the East Coast. And his story is really good too. He came from a pretty wealthy family, or well off, and came to the States, did some work down in Florida, and then decided he was going to move up the coast, and wouldn't take any money from anybody. Him and his wife busted their butts to have what they have today. So he's got a very inspiring story too.
Yeah, owning a few businesses and doing some awesome things, including the jiu-jitsu part. So if you ever up in the Boston area, check out Dedeco. He's definitely someone to connect with.
But I'm not, don't be a fish. Don't be an eagle without feathers.
And slice that cat 50 ways, 100 ways, right?
There's a million ways to slice.
There's a million ways to slice the cat.
But I love what he's saying there. And I like, we talk about technology and the tools that are at people's disposal nowadays. And, they can be used properly or improperly. And I think he's talking about a great way to use them. And a great way to approach jiu-jitsu too is like just be basically well-rounded, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
that's essentially what he's saying.
Yeah, don't have your one thing that you rely on, because somebody's going to be able to counter that one thing that day, and if you don't have an answer, you're probably in trouble.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Listen, before we wrap this up,
5 questions?
Should we?
No.
Should we? Should we? But I want to share something with you, and I don't even know if you know this, but RŌL Radio officially is being listened to on every single continent. I don't know if you knew that.
I did know that because I check the stats every once in a while.
Yeah, so we appreciate you guys wherever you are, and I scroll through the countries, through the statistics, and there are some interesting things. I want to kind of throw this out there. 85% listeners are from U.S., but obviously Canada and UK a big presence. Brazil, Australia, Sweden, New Zealand, Netherlands, France, Germany, and the list keeps going and going. I do want to give shout outs to guys in Poland because they are listening. We see you guys, but there were so many more, as this list goes on. So wherever you're listening to us, we do appreciate. And what do you say? Wherever you're listening or whichever button you're pressing and leave us a review, right? Whatever.
Yeah, hit whatever other button there is. But yeah, definitely leave us a review, subscribe, download all that stuff so we can keep doing it. The clips that we played today just scratched the surface on some of the amazing people that are in this community. And we want to keep talking to these people. It's some part of it's selfishness. I want to keep meeting these people, even though usually it's over a Zoom call. It's great to be involved with them in some small way. So it's really cool.
Before we wrap this up, right at the end, I wanted to quickly talk about top 5 listened episodes.
Somebody's going to be mad.
Well, it is, it's shifted this month up to this month. For I think the last 3 or 4 months, we have pretty steady top 5, and it was shifting in between there. But things have changed, and the Silver Fox popped up to number 5. So, Carl, congratulations. You were top 5 most listened. Dean Lister is number 4. Travis Stevens still in top 5. He's number 3. Dedeco is number 2, and one and only Henry Atkins. Henry Atkins is still leading on the very top 1 most listened RŌL Radio episodes up to this point.
That's pretty great stuff. And some of those people that aren't on there anymore breaks my heart.
Well,
but I mean those episodes right there are amazing. Those names. Sorry, Rudy Topalo was up there for a long time.
Rudy Topalo was up there for a very, very, very long time. And unfortunately, some other names pushed him down. But
sorry, Rudy. But what a great group of people. What a great, Olympians, world champions. It's unbelievable who we've had the privilege to talk to.
Yeah. Shall we wrap this up for today?
Yeah,
Should we continue this on as time goes on?
I'm looking forward to, what is it, what did you say? 2020, 2022? 2022. Wow, we're gonna be doing this a long time.
I hope you do. I hope you do.
Yeah, let's wrap this up. I had a great time. Thank you for getting this thing rolling, for everything you do. If it wasn't for you, I'd be
very miserable.
To quote the great Marcel Cruz, I'd be watching football, drinking beer, and sitting on the couch.
Very possible.
All right, peace.
Later, guys.
Thank you for listening to RŌL Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.